Welcome to another episode of Malicious Compliance by TaleSquare. Here, we dive into real-life stories where people follow orders to the letter, knowing it might lead to some unexpected outcomes. Stick around for 3 intriguing tales of rule following with a twist. Short-staffed? No problem. I work for a visitor attraction in London. Generally, we are out on the floor answering questions, etc. We had a dedicated team that worked in the control room, usually supervisors or those that wanted to become supervisors. Normally, 1 or 2 people were in the control room. They were never out on the floor if they could help it. They watched the CCTV and controlled the breaks, lunches, etc. For instance, if a visitor set off an alarm, they would call us, and we would investigate the alarm. Management decided to pull the supervisors out onto the floor and train floor personnel to be in the control room. Good idea on paper, but in practice? Supervisors didn't want to go on the floor, and those on the floor didn't want to go into the control room. Some of us already worked in the control room as we relieved them for breaks, lunches, etc. Basically, if you were in the control room, you stayed in there. The first training week went something like this. Someone who knew the control room was training 3 or 4 of the floor people. Needless to say, that put us short-staffed on the floor, and management had to go on the floor to cover. As how hard could it be? It will only be a week. Then I can go back to my cushy desk job. The first day, I was training 3 or 4 floor staff, and management/supervisors were on the floor. Management told me to treat them like normal floor staff. Okay, no problem. I asked everyone that I was training, normal floor staff, and we all got big smiles on our faces. Not even 10 minutes go by, and there is a radio call. Can one of you bring the keys for the front door so we can let the public in? It's a 5-minute walk from control to the front door. I radioed one of the managers on the floor. Come to control and pick up the keys and take them to the front door. I get a phone call. Just have so-and-so bring them over. There are 4 of you in there. As per procedure, nobody is allowed out of the control room. Management takes 5 minutes to get to control and then takes the keys over to the front door. So we are late opening. Next radio call. Which key is it? It's number X. They open the doors. Alarm goes off. Control. Why did the alarm go off? You need to call control to let us know exactly when to take the alarm off. Procedure. All of this is written down. Procedures must be followed. Now that the public is in, alarms start going off for various reasons. The public loves going through doors that say, "Door is alarmed." Normal stuff. I start radio calls to management on the floor. Charlie 3, go to door X. Charlie 3, go to door X, etc. Delta 4, relieve Charlie 3 for their lunch. Lunchtime, I get phone calls from people who have been relieved for their lunch on time. Management hasn't figured out that travel time between your post and the break area is not included in your lunch/break. If you have an hour lunch and it takes you 10 minutes walking time to get there, then basically, your lunch is 40 minutes. 10 minutes to go from your post to the break room and 10 minutes to go back to the post. Normal control room staff knew this and would start lunches early to give everyone as much as possible a full lunch. More radio calls. Charlie 3, can you check the toilet? Report of water on the floor. Charlie 3, can you go to X? Visitor wants to use a voucher. Actually, Charlie 3, go to door X. But I'm with a visitor. Doors take priority. Charlie 3. For the rest of the day, we ran management crazy. Everything in the procedures was adhered to. Count the empty spaces in the car park. Check locks on the emergency gates. Check toilets, men's and women's, to see if they need to be refilled with toilet paper. Look for lights out. Fill in your task book, etc. The next day, needless to say, I wasn't in the control room. It didn't matter. The tone was set. It didn't matter who was in there. The rest of the week went by the same. Everyone that followed me ran management nuts. Management, to their credit, changed some things after that. Black sneakers can now be worn. More break rooms closer to post have been opened. Procedures have been loosened up. Control people are back in control, and floor people are on the floor. Everyone is now trained in the control room, but they only have to work it if they want to. Still was a glorious week. We won't pay you to work the same hours as everyone else. In 1996, I started work for a coal mine as a process engineer. I signed a contract where they paid me $55,000, $5,000 more than my last job. I shared an office with my boss, the senior process engineer. I was supposed to be paid $80,000 minimum under the legal award that applied to this workplace, so my union rep took it up, and I got a letter from the company. It said while I had the title process engineer, no qualification was required to do the job. Right. I told my union rep that they advertised for someone with an engineering degree, or I would never have applied. He asked if I had a copy of the newspaper ad. No, but I will get one. This was now 5 months after the ad was run. I called the National Library, and yes, they have a service where I pay for someone's time to look through the papers for me. After a couple of wrong weekends, I finally got it right and had a certified copy of the ad the company had run. My union rep said they are prepared to increase your pay by $20,000. They're saying you can work fewer hours to make up the difference, and even though your contract says the company provides transport to and from work equals a lift with my creepy boss, it is up to me to find transport that suits the hours I now work. So every person on site works from 7:30 to 3, except for me. I work less. Fine. In the many months it took to get this far, I talked to the HR officer, the one who wrote my contract, about the Playboy magazines being read in front of me in the break room by the lab technicians. She told me there was nothing offensive about someone reading a porn magazine in front of me. Yes, it is offensive and illegal by state and federal law. My boss groped my breast a few times while we were in our office. Yes, I am a female engineer. I had no proof and knew he would deny it, and the HR officer wouldn't do her job anyway. So by now, I was happy to have a reason to not drive in to work with my creepy boss. So what was I to do? I gave my boss a dirty look whenever he was within arm's reach of me, and he would back off. I moved my desk 90 degrees, so instead of looking out a window with my boss seated behind me, I had a full view of the room, including him. He was the direct supervisor of all lab staff when he was first employed. I was told the lab guys threatened to go on strike because he was such a shitty boss, so the position of lab supervisor was created, and one lab tech was promoted, and he reports directly to the manager. I decided to ride my husband's motorbike to and from work every day. I also got a crew cut, 1/2 an inch all over, so now I walk in with a crew cut and a motorbike helmet, and my creepy boss couldn't speak words to me at all. Not for 2 months until my hair grew long enough. Then I'd get it cut again. I also got voted in as vice president of the staff union on site. My experience made me happy to accept the position. I went to some union training weekends. While there, the state-level union rep wanted my permission to use my case as one example of why the government cannot cut down the things covered by the enterprise bargaining agreements to a bare minimum. These are agreements negotiated between unions and employers that become part of the legal entitlements of employees. She was presenting real-life examples of how much employees of all kinds get screwed over despite the awards and agreements in place. I agreed. So now, all unions on site are on strike except the staff union, 13 months after I started, and I worked there for another 5 months while the strike continued and accepted a redundancy and left while the strike continued. At this time, the staff union had an agreement with the other unions on site that the warehouse staff employees could use a forklift to unload trucks. The agreement expired in the early weeks of the strike. They and I read the simple half-page of writing. It started 1 year ago. It has no mention of intending to renegotiate or extend the agreement before expiration, which is usually included in these types of agreements, and no renegotiation took place. No, we no longer have this agreement in place. The warehouse guys refused to use a forklift. One staff member who wanted to climb the ladder decided he would use the forklift in the warehouse, Mr. Brown. The company employed a mine manager from the US. It was later said he was a known strike breaker. When the strike started, all staff were to attend a meeting. In this meeting, the SEPO manager told us that we would be shot at and have our cars damaged if we drove across the picket line. Makes no sense worrying about damage if most of the cars are company cars anyway. We would also all be beaten up by the strikers. All of us said nothing, but I thought, you don't know Aussies, mate. So management got a bus to drive everyone to and from work for everyone's protection. Most got on the bus every day. Since it was cooler weather, I drove my red station wagon to and from work across a picket line every day. It was actually a great experience. As a process engineer, I was on a rotating weekend roster, so I was the foreman sometimes and also relieved when a foreman was away sick. All the employees in the processing plant, both production and maintenance, knew me, so I would drive up to the picket line for a chat and laugh. And the guys would say, "You have to go. We don't want you to see what we do to the bus," as the bus rounded the corner. I also stopped to chat with the security guards that were employed after someone poisoned the general manager's dog. Someone decided to hold a fishing competition at a dam on site. 2 days later, all staff were ordered to take 2 weeks leave. Those who had no leave accrued were ordered to take unpaid leave. So I took unpaid leave, knowing it was illegal to require me to take it and knowing HR knew this as well. The general manager gave a press release stating that staff elected to take 2 weeks leave. I called the paper to correct the lie. Staff were forced to take 2 weeks leave, and some were required to take 2 weeks unpaid. The paper printed this. These ruffled feathers. The day we got back, it was announced that those who took unpaid leave would be paid for that time. 2 months after this, the general manager was talking to someone at work, saw me and said, "Why haven't I seen you on the bus?" I announced to him and those present that I am not paid to work the same hours as everyone else. He was confused. I explained I was paid less than the award, and instead of paying me the full amount, the company chose to increase my pay some, but not the whole way, so I would work fewer hours. So I have been driving myself in for the last 12 months, and no, I won't be getting on company transport now. The police got involved when the company reported the strikers were laying across the road stopping them from getting to work. The police sergeant was at the picket line when he got a call about the strikers doing this. He was heard to say, "I am at the picket line right now, and no one is laying across the road." The foreman still drove their company cars in. If you were fair, you were not harassed, but those who weren't fair were harassed. I was offered a redundancy. I wanted to talk to one of the wages union reps who I personally knew. I wanted to know if the company was serious about the negotiations. If they weren't, I was out. I left work and got to the picket line after the bus this day. I pulled over on the side of the road, got out, and walked in the ditch beside the bus to go see the union rep who was with most people under the shelter in the sports field. We went for a quick walk, and he told me the company wasn't serious at all, so to take the redundancy. Months later, the company contracted out all of the maintenance and other functions like mine and my boss's role. The next day, staff at work were fuming, and a meeting was called. We were no longer permitted to use the email for union business. I was phoned and asked if I picketed the bus. No. That is what people decided I did. Bring on the staff union meeting. It was heated. I apologized for the hurt caused to people and said I see in hindsight I should have done things differently. Why didn't you put out an email? Me? I'm never using company email again. Another attendee? Why didn't you call her and ask her like I did? I explained that if I was picketing the bus, I would have been standing in front of the bus holding a sign. I wasn't. I walked alongside the bus in a ditch on the side of the road. I explained I was going there to have a private conversation with someone regarding a decision about a redundancy I was offered. A member moved that no staff union members be permitted to stop at the picket line. This was not carried, as people can stop wherever they like, and the majority agreed. It was moved that all staff union members be required to travel to and from work on the bus. Quote karma. I don't work the same hours as everyone else on site, as I was underpaid from the start. Instead of paying me the same hours, I was told to work fewer hours and have been driving myself in since then, for most of my time being employed here. There was no light to stand on. For those wondering, Mr. Brown didn't have a job post-strike. Refuse to stop using acronyms for everything. I'll make sure to follow you to the letter. For the record, I think acronyms do not save time and can make communication more difficult. They only make sense in printed communication with a clear definition on first use. It also assumes that everyone knows the acronyms you're using. I think people who use them constantly are just trying to make what they're saying seem more important than it is. Background. I had a manager who was significantly less experienced than I was, by about 15 years. I was put under her because I was a department of one. She was passionate about my work even though she didn't have hands-on experience with it, and no one else wanted to manage my specific area. I liked her a lot, though her inexperience showed through. To seem more knowledgeable, she would frequently use acronyms. I pointed out that many of her acronyms were obscure or department-specific and could confuse others, but she insisted that this was just how business communication was done. Here's where the malicious compliance comes in. I was asked to attend a fairly important industry conference. I wasn't well known in the industry, but I was recognized for my specific area, sustainability. My role was essentially to be the pony in their dog and pony show, to make and log contacts and follow up on them. My manager wanted me to focus on a specific type of contact, which I didn't like because I felt I was smart enough to gauge who was worth talking to. She told me to talk to SMEs. She didn't clarify what SMEs meant. While I know SMEs usually stands for subject matter experts, this conference had many nonprofits, NGOs, government reps, and religious organizations, so SME could also mean small and medium enterprises. So I spent all my networking time talking to various small and medium enterprises. I collected the data and returned my report to my manager. She looked at it, confused. I explained that I followed her instructions and talked to SMEs, both subject matter experts and small and medium enterprises. She was not pleased. The CEO, who was actually friendly, and I met weekly to discuss strategy and working with activist shareholders, brought up the contacts I made. I explained what happened, and he rolled his eyes. I told him that in my off hours, I had drinks and food with a lot of subject matter experts in my extended network who would be happy to talk to him. I gave him a list and told him to let me know if he wanted me to set up introductions. After that, every time my manager presented, she included an acronym list page and generally avoided using them. I felt bad for her. She didn't realize she advanced not because of her skill, but because she was the CEO's type. This was the third company she followed him to. He had a group of young, smart women who all looked alike, and a trophy second wife who looked like them but a bit older. She advanced beyond her skills because of him. Everyone under her left, and she became a department of one. She was put in a corner at meetings and told not to make mistakes, something she had done several times. I like her, but I feel bad because she doesn't realize that the CEO, who everyone likes, is also keeping her around as eye candy. This means she'll never gain the experience needed to rise to similar high levels in her career outside of his influence.